Week 5 has officially kicked off for My Hero Ultra Rumble, and with it, the addition of a new character. There is a brand new technical Aizawa in the game, and we are going to be placing him today into this tier list. Now, I know Endeavor is sitting here as well, because, spoiler, he is the next character coming up after Aizawa. However, we're not going to place him yet because obviously we don't know how good he's going to be in the game. And Aizawa has only been out for about 2 days now, and honestly, we might end up changing where we position him in this tier list, so just keep that in mind. But we will be positioning him in this tier list this time around. But before that, we do need to make a couple of changes, a couple of differentiations between characters and where they're going to be, and adjust accordingly. In case you don't know or you haven't kept up with the tier list over these past 4 weeks, I say every time I do a tier list, I will adjust accordingly according to what the comments say and what people are feeling about the characters, so on and so forth. So last week we actually organized all these characters into order for each tier, and Sue is at the top of S tier. Let's have no fantasies otherwise, right? Sue is literally the best character in game right now. The only reason Toga is above Sue is because of what she can do, and I wouldn't say she's necessarily like above Sue, okay? Just to clarify, I'm not saying Toga is necessarily better than Sue. She just doesn't really fit into like this order because of the way she works, right? She can become any character and she can be really, really good. So Toga transforms into Sue, you're now the best character in the game. However, if Toga transforms into Kendo, you might be struggling a little bit. And then Toga's kit herself is just kind of, it's okay, it's mid, but it's not like super crazy like Sue's kit, who is just really, really good. So for that reason, Toga is kind of like one of the hardest characters to place, but I would say she's an S tier character because she can become S tier characters, and she does have a very high skill ceiling when it comes to using her correctly though. But make no mistake, I would say technically Sue is at the top of S tier, but we're going to leave Toga here just for the sake of the fact that she can transform into everyone else. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Below Sue, we have Bakugo. Bakugo is still really, really good. Even though they nerfed Bakugo's damage, he can still literally like clap everybody's cheeks below him really easily. He does struggle a little bit against other projectile heroes like Todoroki and Deku, who are also very good. Bakugo has insane movement when it comes to his ability to fly around, and even with the introduction of Aizawa in the game, we thought maybe that would change things a little bit. Maybe it would make it a little bit easier to kill characters like Bakugo and Sue because he's going to be able to shut off quirks, right? Well, that's not really the case, but we'll explain that more when we place Aizawa and go over his kit. But yeah, so I don't think the introduction of Aizawa necessarily changed anything, and I think these two characters are definitely still the top 2 meta characters right now for My Hero Ultra Rumble, and they'll probably continue to be that way for a little bit unless they end up doing some nerfs, which we'll see if that happens. So Todoroki and Deku, I'm okay with their placements right now. I'm not really going to be changing anything on the higher tiers. It's when we get to the lower tiers that we'll see more changes. But Todoroki and Deku are going to stay in S tier because they are both really good. Todoroki has good movement and the ability to do quite a bit of damage, and his burn is really insane, and he has AoE damage, which is really good. Deku can do really good damage, but his movement requires him to use a skill, which is his Black Whip, and then so you're trading out using your Black Whip for a capture in order to use it for movement, whereas like on Bakugo, you don't have to waste a move to use his movement, which makes Bakugo a little bit better. And then Todoroki's ice sliding around is a little bit better because while you're moving, it's still an attack skill, so you're still actually getting damage and value out of it, which is why we have Deku below. In terms of damage, all 3 are about on par with the amount of damage they do, and their kits are fairly similar. But we're just going to put Deku at the bottom because his maneuverability, I would argue, is not as good as the 2 above him. And so that's why S tier is the way it is. Sue is at the top because her maneuverability, her damage, her combos, everything about her is absolutely freaking insane, okay? So really, really good. If you ever play ranked and you join with randoms, this is the character you want to be, because even if your randoms die, you can still do really, really well with Sue. Next, we have All Might in A tier. All Might is at the top of A tier because he has really decent damage. He can deflect projectiles. He has his jump, which lets him fly from one place to another and get out of bad situations. All Might is a really solid character. The reason he's an A tier is because his projectiles don't go quite as far as these 3 characters above him. He has a lower or like a mid-range to his attacks, and so for that reason we're kind of keeping All Might here in A tier. Additionally, his tracking on his skill where he punches and then creates a tornado afterwards is not always the greatest, so that's why we're going to keep him there. Ida is also up here towards the top of A tier, right below All Might, and I would argue the same reason he's an A tier, not S tier, is because his tracking can be a little bit weird sometimes. He has really good combos, but I feel like when it comes to fighting people at range, these characters above him are going to be a lot better if they can aim their shots. Now, an Ida that's good, knows how to weave around people's shots and stuff like that, can be devastating to characters like these if he closes the gap, but the trick is closing the gap is Ida, because these characters still have pretty good maneuverability. Like Bakugo can fly away, Su can just jump away, Todoroki can ice slide away, so it can make it hard for an Ida to get in close and actually do what he needs to do, which is why he's an A tier, because he does struggle so much against the S tier characters to be able to actually get in there and do really good amounts of damage. Compress is also up here in A tier. I'm really happy with Compress in A tier. A lot of people I feel like slept on him at the beginning of the game, but his deflect is insanely good. Him dropping cars on people is really good. It's insanely good in like tight and closed spaces. You can't avoid a car inside a building. It's hitting you one way or the other. So Compress is really good. He has good escapability with his ability to compress himself and fly away. You can compress an ally in your pocket. So I mean, he's pretty solid overall as a character. The one complaint I would have is that personally, I feel like Compress's special skill, the ability to compress an ally, is not that great and not that useful, whereas everyone else's kit above him, their special skill, their abilities all feel useful. Like Deku puts a character on his back, so does All Might, right? They put characters on their back. It doesn't feel, it's not crazy, but it's still better than just putting an ally in your pocket. Like, I don't know. I feel like Compress's special skill is not the greatest. Bakugo's special skill, insanely good. Probably one of the best special skills in the game, being able to fly around. Su, being able to revive people, insanely good, right? So that's why we're kind of keeping Compress here in A tier as well. And then, once again, he just struggles when it comes to having fights with these long-range characters who can do really good amounts of damage to him from a distance. He will struggle against them. Next, we have Cementos. I have wanted to, for a very long time, kind of put Cementos into S tier, but unfortunately he has like very little maneuverability when it comes to getting from place to place quickly. Now, that's not to say he doesn't have maneuverability in terms of vertical maneuverability or mobility, because he can obviously create the towers, climb up to the top of buildings very quickly. He can rain down his sniper shots on people and do insane amounts of damage, right? Cementos is really good in that aspect, but when it comes to getting out of a fight, disengaging so that you can heal or do whatever you need to do, he has no disengage really to speak of, unless you just create pillars, sit on top of a pillar and heal yourself or shield yourself. But anyone that has played for a decent amount of time knows what you're doing up there as a Cementos, and they're going to, as Bakugo, fly up there, as Deku, Black Whip up there, or as Su, jump up there. So hopefully, if they know what they're doing, they're going to counter Cementos. And so for that reason, I feel like Cementos could almost, like, he's so close to being S tier, but his maneuverability just isn't quite there. And so we're going to keep him in A tier. But in the right hands, I would argue a good Cementos could take on a lot of these characters, because just that's how strong and how crazy his kit is. But a bad Cementos could absolutely screw your team over and put him down in D tier. So he's kind of a weird one to rank, but he could go both ways. Next, we have Mountain Lady. Mountain Lady is a character who is in A tier right now, but this is gonna make a lot of people mad. This is gonna make so many people mad, but I'm gonna drag her down. Here's your first change. Mount Lady is down to A tier. I don't know if I'm gonna keep her at the top of A tier yet. We'll figure it out as we go, but there's a reason for that. The reason I'm moving Mount Lady down is because now, when she transforms, guess who's in the game? Guess who's just a big target for all the other teams when she transforms? If Mountain Lady transforms and she gets her quirk shut off by an Aizawa, and it could be any Aizawa anywhere on the map potentially that could be looking at her, she can't do anything. She's just standing there as a big target. And that was her whole thing that kept her in A tier, is the fact that she could be a giant. She could win those end circles and be really, really good. Now that Aizawa is in the game, I feel like that is a ridiculously hard counter to Mount Lady. Now, we thought Aizawa was going to counter like Sue and Bakugo, but no. We countered an A tier character who was already kind of mid at best, but we've made her worse now. So Mount Lady goes down to B tier. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys, because now you just have a big walking billboard that says, shoot me. Next, we have Kaminari. Kaminari, I'm actually going to leave here. He has decent AoE, he has decent movement with his dash, he is able to electrify himself and paralyze enemies if they touch him. He's still really, really good. He does struggle to close the gap on these characters above him, which is why he stays in A tier. Also, his range is not the greatest on his electric bolt, especially when you're not zoomed in, it's even worse. So, you know, that's why we're keeping Kaminari in A tier. Shigaraki is going to follow Kaminari. Now, there is an argument for Shigaraki to move up in A tier. I would actually say man, I have such a hard time. I almost wanted to move him up like to right here, but I'm going to leave him where he is, okay? And there's a reason for that. The reason I'm leaving Shigaraki at the bottom of A tier is because of the fact that you have to have ground line of sight to be able to hit people, which it really, really is hard. It can be hard to do in given certain situations, right? If you're in Typhoon Zone, stuff like that, where you have close quarters, it can make it a little bit easier, especially if the circle's small, to get that damage in and to do those massive amounts of damage to people. But if you are still, let's think in the Typhoon Zone, okay? On ground level, you know, tight space, it works really well with Shigaraki. But if you're in Typhoon Zone, you're on the ground, somebody's up on the top of the building in Typhoon Zone, let's say there's a Deku up there, Deku is just going to shoot down at you. What do you do with Shigaraki? You either try to climb the building and get shot, run around the backside of the building, try to hide, heal up, climb the building, and then get up to him, and then he just jumps down. You jump down to follow him, he jumps back up and starts shooting you again, right? Shigaraki can be very, very hard because he doesn't have the greatest maneuverability, and he has to have ground line of sight to be able to do damage to people. So that's why we're keeping him at the bottom of A. He can do insane damage. He is really, really, really good. Like, does some of the best damage in game. He does true damage, meaning he ignores shields when he grabs people and can just ignore those guard points and completely destroy people. But he is going to be hard to use, and his kit just doesn't allow him, unfortunately, to compete with the characters that are above him. I feel like if people are playing these characters correctly, Kaminari beats Shigaraki because he's keeping his distance. Even though he doesn't have the longest range, he'll keep his distance, and he'll just use his alpha to, you know, outrange Shigaraki when from height, you know? Even a Kaminari can stand, scope in at the top of the building, and shoot down at a Shigaraki, and the Shigaraki can't do anything if the Kaminari has height. Now, if they're on the same level, they're both standing on the ground floor together, Shigaraki wins that all day long, right? But if these characters are playing correctly, all these characters that are placed above Shigaraki, they'll win those fights, which is why we're putting Shigaraki at the bottom of A tier. Hopefully that makes sense. Moving on to B tier, we have Mount Lady here. We're going to skip over her for a second. Kirishima recently got buffs. Buffs that give him more charges on his beta skill to be able to dash around, and he is going to also stay harder longer with his special action. And I originally, in week 4, had moved him up from the bottom of B tier to the top of B tier because those buffs actually made him really good and really viable. I think personally, having played Kirishima more and trying him more and really getting to experience him, I think a lot of people just don't like him because he lacks range. But I think people sleep on the fact that his hardening is ridiculously good. Like, you take very little damage when you go harder, is what he says in game. It sounds weird to say out loud, but that's what he says in game. So you take very little damage when you do go harder. You can 1v3 teams. I think he is insanely good when used correctly, and I think he deserves A tier behind Shigaraki. I think Shigaraki's still going to be a little bit better because Shigaraki does have better range than Kirishima, but I do think Kirishima deserves to be up a tier now that he has got those extra charges on his beta, that his hardness does last longer. I think Kirishima is a very viable and good pick when going into My Hero Ultra Rumble games. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. So next we have Momo. And Momo is another character that a lot of people have argued, a very controversial character, I would say. Some people say Momo should be C tier, some people say she should be S tier, and then you got people like me who are kind of in the middle, and I think she's an okay character, but she is a very difficult character to use in a way. But let's lay out her kit and what she can do. So her alpha is a sweeping, potentially AoE attack. Doesn't have the greatest range, but it can do massive amounts of damage, right? Her beta and gamma skills allow her to either put up a riot shield that lets her dash around and basically takes no damage, no attacks can hurt her while she has that riot shield, or she has a cannon that is one of the hardest things to aim in the game, but one of the most rewarding things in the game in terms of damage, and it has a ridiculously long range. Like, you can sniper shot people across the map if you're standing on the top of mountain zone. So she has good range. She has good defensive abilities with her shield, and she has a sweeping AoE that can take on a team. Now, where is she lacking? Why do I have her down here in B tier? That might be the question. Okay, she is lacking in maneuverability. She has no way to climb up walls, climb buildings, stuff quickly. She is not a very fast character, and she's easy to catch out. Now, her special skill, I haven't even talked about that, does give you grab bags, which are very nice for supporting your team because they can drop you full heals, which you can use to heal your entire team. And so her special skill is really good for that. But her special skill does not really help her in any particular way like Bakugo's does for movement, okay? And so for that reason, I had Yayorozu down here in B tier. But when I'm looking at Yayorozu and I'm looking at her kit, I feel like it's not fair to have her down here in B tier just because she lacks maneuverability, because characters like Cementos don't have maneuverability, and he's up here in A tier, right? So I'm gonna do what I have been holding off on doing for a while, and I'm gonna move Yayorozu up to A tier. I do think she's still at the bottom of A tier. I do think like Shigaraki does more damage than her. I think Kirishima does more damage, has more team wipe potential. And even Kirishima has, I would argue, more maneuverability than Yayorozu, because Yayorozu does have maneuverability with her shield, but it's so limited and it's hard to turn and actually make full use of. So that's why we're putting her at the bottom of A tier. But I do think she is a tier character, and previously I had thought she was at the top of B tier, obviously. So that's kind of where we're at with her. Next we have Dabi. Dabi is a really good character when it comes to setting traps, when it comes to putting down his fire around him to block out enemy fire so you can revive teammates. I feel like, however, his traps are not that great, and his alpha primary fire, being able to track people is good, but the movement speed on that alpha primary fire is still not great, right? They buffed it so it moves faster, but not as fast as I would like. However, I will say this, I do think Dabi is more useful than Mount Lady right now, who is just a giant walking target. Okay, so we're gonna put Dabi above Mount Lady at the top of B tier, but I still think he's not quite as good as Kirishima and Yayorozu, because even Kirishima and Yayorozu have more maneuverability than Dabi, which makes Dabi one of the more hard characters to use. And then it feels like sometimes when you play Dabi that you only have two skills that are really useful to you, which is your alpha, your primary fire, and your ability to put the ring of fire around you. A lot of people find difficulty with placing his traps, and making use of the traps is the big thing. Once you play Dabi enough, you get used to Dabi, you know where to place the traps, but it's not always guaranteed that people walk into your traps. People get smart to where Dabi's place their traps, and it's honestly one of the more difficult characters to play. And so because he's so difficult to play and make use of, his alpha primary fire feels like it doesn't quite do enough. It does a lot more now than it did, but it doesn't feel like it quite does enough yet. I feel like I'm going to put him at the top of B tier. I feel like there's still more Dabi buffs incoming eventually. I feel like they're going to buff him, right? But until they do that, I'm comfortable having him at the top of B tier. Hopefully you guys feel the same way. Next we have Ibra. Ibra is going to stay where she's at. I feel like she is almost, well, do we want her above Mount Lady? So Ibra has no maneuverability at all. Mount Lady has her kick, but Ibra has the ability to grab people. Actually, we move her up for sure. I just debated it in my head. Okay, the reason I'm moving her up is because the combination of Aizawa and Ibra now, while Aizawa counters Mount Lady, he works really well with Ibra because capture, really annoying. Really annoying. So the ability to have a double capture there between the two, yeah, that synergy is insane. It's a little bit crazy. So Ibra is actually better now because of the introduction of Aizawa. So that's why we're going to move her up. She also has the instant res too. So yeah, I'm very comfortable putting her above Mount Lady because of her special skill actually being useful as opposed to her gigantification now not being nearly as useful as it used to be. Uraraka. This is a big point of controversy for a lot of people. And that is because of her alpha skill, which the developers have said they are working on fixing. They acknowledge it's a problem. And so with her alpha skill not working, let's say 50% of the time. I might be giving too much or not enough. I don't know. It just depends. It's different for everybody, right? But let's say it doesn't work 50% of the time. That is why she is going in B tier, because that can literally ruin games for you and cause you to lose ranked points if you're in ranked, or just ruin the experience for you. So until they get that bug fixed, I do not think I will be updating Uraraka. I do not think I will be moving Uraraka up anytime soon. And while I think she is really good, I feel like that bug, I just can't get past it. It ruins games for people. And until that's fixed, it really bugs me, okay? To be clear though, I will preface and say this, okay? Uraraka does not belong in B tier if everything works correctly. Uraraka belongs probably towards the top of A tier. Yeah, towards the top. Like, I would say probably right below Ida. In between Ida and Compress is where Uraraka realistically belongs. Maybe even higher. But I can't do that. In good conscience, I can't do it until her alpha's fixed. Hopefully you guys understand. And, you know, the day she gets fixed, oh, I'm going to love it. And I'm going to love moving her up for you guys. But until then, she stays here just until she gets fixed, okay? Next, we have Kendo. Kendo is a really good support character, but when it comes to like playing ranked and stuff like that, the idea is to get damage, and she doesn't do a great job getting damage. Her shield is really good for protecting teammates. She can pick up teammates and throw them, which can have its uses, like with Kirishima to dive bomb people, but how practical is grabbing people and throwing them really? I don't know. Her special action, it's cool, but not as useful as like Bakugo's once again. Bakugo's special action is better. Sue's special action is really insane, right? So her special action just leaves something to be desired there. And then her maneuverability, she doesn't really have any maneuverability. So she's lacking in her special action. She's lacking in maneuverability. She's lacking in damage, right? So all of those things really hold Kendo back. Okay, and now we get into the final phase here, which you guys have been waiting for, where we talk about Aizawa. So Aizawa, I feel like I've seen a lot of people make this comparison, is similar to Sue in that he is a support character, okay? Besides him being bugged to hell, he's actually got a really good kit and a really fun and interesting kit. And here's the difference. The main difference I'm going to say between Kendo and Aizawa that sets him apart, makes him better than Kendo, is that he has good maneuverability. Really good maneuverability if you use it right, between his kicks and between his alpha that lets him drop kick to places. Now, what a lot of people are pressed about or annoyed about is the fact that he does a backflip every time that you do a drop kick to go to like the top of the building or stuff like that, okay? Well, the answer is simple. You just got to get used to his movement, and maybe in place of using your alpha skill to get to the top of a building, use your beta skill where you're going to kick to the top. It works just fine. I've done it plenty of times. Or get used to aiming his alpha skill at a higher building, so you backflip off the side of that building onto the lower building that you're aiming to go for. However, that does require a little bit more thought, especially in the heat of battle, so people struggle with this character. Now, just in terms of his kit, let's talk about that, because we already have established he has more maneuverability than Kendo, so that's going to automatically place him higher than Kendo, right? But for his alpha skill, the ability to bind people and pull them in, let your teammates potentially hit them, can be like a one-shot KO combination if you have good teammates. Now, if you are playing with randoms, which a lot of people do because crossplay is not yet a thing and you're maybe not able to play with your best friends yet, and you hop in with randoms, you grab somebody, your alpha does absolutely no damage at all unless you're doing the drop kick where you jump before it. So if you just grab somebody and bind them, cool, you bound them for 2 seconds and done nothing. Okay, so that's a very supportive type move, and a lot of people aren't a big fan of the fact that he's not doing damage right there. His beta skill is 5 kicks. The 5 kicks, the idea behind it is really good. It's a great movement tool. But what I've told a lot of people is don't level that skill. The reason being, the tracking on that particular skill is atrocious. You will kick them once or twice and actually clip through the enemy, or you'll kick them once and twice and just fly up into the distance, or like there's just so many weird things that happen with his kick, and you don't get the full damage out of his kick that you're looking to get. Like, it's really, really, really weird with his tracking, okay? So if that kick was fully operational, worked exactly the way it was supposed to, and landed all 5 kicks, it would be good. Another glitch I've also seen with the kick is that you land all 5 kicks and they're invulnerable the whole time and never took any damage. I don't know why that happens, but it happens. Okay, so it's a big problem. Okay, and then after that we have his final skill, his gamma skill, which I would argue is his best skill, and that is the sweeping AoE, where he sends out all of his cloths and does a massive amount of damage. It works really well when you're up close to multiple opponents. It's good when you pull people in with your alpha, because then you can combo into that. It's really, really good, right? And that is the skill I recommend leveling up to everybody. You can do it in the air when you're being attacked, and it can kind of get you out of bad situations. So I think the gamma skill is really good on Aizawa, and it's the least bug skill on Aizawa. And then last but not least, his special skill, where he looks at people and erases their quirks. If they break line of sight, you're not erasing their quirk anymore. When people come out from behind objects, it takes a second. There's a delay before you start erasing their quirks, which is kind of annoying. And it doesn't erase special actions, so Bakugo's still able to fly around really easily, right? And characters like Sue are still able to resurrect and stuff like that, so it doesn't erase the special quirks. It doesn't really change any of that. Additionally, if you take damage or somebody's midway through a shot when you start erasing, let's say you look at a Bakugo, he's flying in the air, you're looking up at him, and he's starting to take a shot. You turn on your erasure, the shot still goes through, and if it hits you, your erasure doesn't matter anymore. He's still able to hit you. I've seen many, many, many cases where experienced them myself, actually, where people erase a quirk. Like, you're 5 feet away from the character. You're not even that far, right? You're looking directly at them. Nothing's breaking your line of sight, and they are still able to use their quirks. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, the erasure is so bugged. It's really, really bugged, in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if I'm crazy, but I feel like I did a poll on YouTube as well to ask if people thought he was bugged or not. And most people said he's a good character, but there's some issues sometimes, right? And I would say the same thing. I feel like 7 out of 10 times the erasure works correctly. But then there's those 3 times that the erasure doesn't work the right way, and I'm standing there like an idiot, staring at somebody, not doing anything, and then I get attacked and lose half my health bar because the erasure didn't work correctly, right? And that's a problem. That's a really, really big problem. And so, assuming everything in Aizawa's kit worked correctly, right, he would be a top of A tier character. Like, he actually has really good maneuverability. He has a crazy kit when it comes to teamwork and stuff like that. But since his stuff doesn't necessarily work correctly, because he requires a team to make him useful, he's kind of in that same, a lot of people have compared him to Kendo. However, I am going to say he is better than Kendo because he does have maneuverability. What that means is Aizawa is better than Mount Lady, better than Uraraka. I think he still has his bugs, but even with his bugs, like, I feel like he's still more usable than Uraraka is, because like her big thing is speed, moving around, grappling to things, and when your grapple fails, it just messes her whole kit up. Aizawa, on the other hand, while it sucks that his erasure does glitch as much as it does, you don't have to rely on erasure to play this character, right? You can play this character and actually do fairly well with them, with the other skills. And even though the beta sometimes glitched, you usually will still land it. You just might not do the amount of damage you're looking for. So overall, I don't know. It's hard for me to place Aizawa because of the bugs. But like I said, imagine there were no bugs, he's definitely up here in A tier. Uraraka's up here in A tier without bugs. But for now, we're gonna put them in B tier. The reason I'm putting him above Mount Lady is because obviously Aizawa counters Mount Lady now, so I feel like he should be above Mount Lady. So middle of B tier, I feel like is fine, and I feel like a lot of people feel like myself in saying that Aizawa has had kind of a mid character release. I don't think he's the best character. I don't think he's the worst character. He's just kind of mid. And honestly, my opinion of the matter is maybe the devs were like, okay, we teased Aizawa in the end of the trailer for the launch of the game. We've given them a date that we have to release him by. We know there's still these bugs, but we're going to release him anyways and then work on those bugs. That would be my guess as their mindset, you know, but should they have waited to release Aizawa and worked out all the bugs? Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, or are you happy they pushed him out when they did? It's up for debate. And like I said before, we will place Endeavor in the, well, not the next tier list, but in a following tier list whenever he comes out, and look forward to the week 6 tier list when we adjust some of these things. Maybe they'll do some patches, maybe they'll update some of these characters, some of these bugs, and I can't wait to do a tier list when those things finally get fixed. If you guys enjoyed the video, please go down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.
Maybach